we are going to get started and hopefully more students pop in. So first off, I want to say, oh, Jesus is here. Oh,
Awesome.
did somebody let him in? I hope so. Oh. Hi, Jesus. Welcome. Uh, so, first off, I would like to say welcome everybody to Spoken Word with Yosimar Reyes. We're super excited that you have joined us today. So, this next speaker, Yosimar, he is a nationally acclaimed poet and public speaker. He was born in Guerrero, Mexico, and raised in East Side, San Jose. A lot of his poetry and writing explores themes of migration and sexuality. And the advocate named Reyes, one of 13 LGBTQ Latinos changing the world, and Remezcla included Reyes on their list of 10 up-and-coming Latinx poets you need to know. So again, I want to say it is an honor. I am blessed. I admire, read, and follow all their his work. So I'm super excited that he's here with us at Cuesta. And just give a round of applause and thank you, Yosimar. Welcome, gracias. Thank you for being with us today. We are super honored. So welcome. I will pass the floor on to you.
Buenos dias, everybody. Thank you so much for having me with these circumstances. Thank you. I know that, it would be ideal to meet in person and, check out your amazing school. But, we're dealing with so much right now. But yeah, my name is Yosimar Reyes. I'm a poet. I'm a writer. And I've been doing this work for a while, right? And then I'm originally from San Jose, but I'm currently living in Los Angeles, but quarantining in San Jose again. Decided to come back to be with my family and to just, work out of here. I'm gonna start off with a video that we produced with my friend Jean Millicane, who's an amazing videographer out of Oakland. And how this video came to be was that during this pandemic, I realized that my abuelita lives in a neighborhood and most of them are undocumented of folks that we live around. And then there was an article on the San Jose Mercury News that came out that stated that there were 3 zip codes that were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And it so happened that those 3 zip codes were zip codes that were heavily populated by Latinos. So they developed like a task force that was discussing like, why is it that this population is being disproportionately impacted? But beyond that, I started thinking, really witnessing the way that, the hours were getting come back from certain workers. People were losing their job because they don't need them anymore. And then I started witnessing the way that undocumented workers were definitely impacted way more. And just witnessing the way that my grandma and her friends started developing mechanisms of support for each other, like sharing resources or like, oh, you should go here, they'll help you here. And then, we got that stimulus check for $1,200, but sadly, undocumented folks that pay taxes, but with an ITIN number, because we do pay taxes with an ITIN number, did not qualify for that stimulus check. And then Governor Newsom announced that they were gonna give $500 for every household people that did not qualify, right? But what people don't really understand that it's the mechanics of how undocumented people live, especially with higher rent. That sometimes you live 3 families to an apartment or 2 families to an apartment. So that means that one apartment gets $500, and we already been in quarantine for 7 months. So I don't know how long, you can stretch out even $1,200. So I started witnessing that, and I started deciding that, listen, I have a platform, which is, I feel like I have a strong following, and I have the ability to kind of bring light to these things. So we produced this video, and I started sharing the stories of the dynamic people that I met on my social media. And then people decided to want to help, and collectively, through one poem. This is, I think, the amazing thing, that oftentimes we don't think that art can activate places or art can impact people. But through one poem, I was able to write $7,000 in one day. and partner up with a local nonprofit organization to match that. And collectively, I think we were able to help about 23 undocumented families with some sort of aid. And now that I'm continuing that work, simply because I feel like, you know, my work is about these specific folks that I write about, these subjects. Um, and yeah, and now, you know, people are kind of understanding a little bit more about like the different dynamics that comes with, you know, embodying this kind of social conditioning. So I'll share this first poem. It's titled What About Us? Let's see. Mi abuela is 85 years old, and since we began social distancing, abuela's distraction has been spent in our living room watching telenovelas y las noticias. I spent my day stuck in my room, pressured by writing deadlines and Zoom calls. I try to break down to her how I can still work through the computer and what a Zoom call is, but it goes over her head, so she leaves me alone for a couple of hours until she comes barging in the room reminding me, "No has comido en todo el día." We sit down to eat, and through conversation, she explained to me the latest updates with COVID-19. Abuela doesn't understand that through social media, I'm already aware of these updates. Univision gives her tips on how to disinfect the house, precautions she should warn us about when running essential errands. She knows that she's high risk, being that she's 85, so she's very attentive to what the news informs her. Trump announced a stimulus check of $1,200 given to every American. Excitedly, she asked, "Y nosotros? ¿Nos van a dar?" I have to explain to her that undocumented people who file taxes with an ITIN number do not qualify. She shows concern for her comadres because she knows they aren't as lucky as her. She knows she has me, and with my English, I've been essential in helping navigate resources for her. She also heard that Governor Newsom in California announced an eviction moratorium. ¿Y qué es eviction? I explained to her that this means landlords cannot evict people for not being able to pay the rent. But it does not make sense, because even if you're not able to pay, your rent will accumulate and you will need to pay back rent. For many undocumented people who live paycheck to paycheck, this will create a system in which they will be indebted to landlords. No es justo. Si nosotros trabajamos. Abuela is aware that during this pandemic, undocumented labor is the backbone that is holding America together. These essential workers are the same ones we've seen go viral for being asked to speak English while providing customer service. These are the workers so many opposed to making a living wage with the excuse, if they wanted to make more money, they should have gone to school. As if education did not equal student loans and was a guarantee of making a living wage in this country. These are also the farm workers we essentialize when wanting to prove that brown hands picked your salad. Abuela's comadres are like her, non-traditional workers. They are street vendors, recycle bottles and cans, work cleaning hotel rooms, nannies, or go door to door selling Mary Kay products. She calls them, and when they have questions, she hands me the phone so I can explain to them the resources provided locally. Las señoras are grateful for my intelligence, and before hanging up say, "Gracias a Dios que te llamé." Thank God I called you. In the same regard, Abuela has placed the uncertainty of this moment in prayer. She sits with the giant print Bible in her lap, and with a magnifying glass, she reads scriptures. During this quarantine, she has vowed to read the Bible cover to cover. She says her faith is the sole reason she has been able to survive this country, and I believe her. It takes a divine power, unearthly energy to be undocumented in America. While the rhetoric in this country is that we are the invisible enemy, Abuela and her comadres built networks of support for one another. Through phone calls, texts, and WhatsApp messages, they check in on each other. While the Trump administration weaponizes these moments to vilify us, we prepare for the next battle that lies ahead. The invisible enemy, a group of señoras praying for the fate of the undocumented. So yeah, that's the video that we produced, and just trying to get like more visualization. And the beautiful thing about this video is that we were shooting in the courtyard. We were just shooting my grandma, and then the ladies started come out and they were like, "I want to be in the video. I want to be in the video. I want." So that's how we managed. Because I'm always very like apprehensive about asking people to be in videos, simply because, you know, it's also, you know, you're concerned for, you know, what people might think of them. But they were really adamant about being in the video, so we got them in the video. But yeah, thanks to this video, we were able to kind of aid a lot of them and help, you know, and it wasn't like a large amount, but I think we're definitely doing our part in providing a lot of help. And we know that this kind of this virus has kind of really brought forth like the really how people are living, right? And some people don't have access to the internet, some people are not technically savvy, they're the digital divide. And then specifically this one, right? Because everything became digital, so people were trying to aid people, but they were like, okay, you need a bank account, you need all these other things that a lot of times people don't necessarily have access to. So it really brought forth a lot of these inequalities that exist in this country. And at central of my work, I always try to kind of center undocumented voices. I try to center us simply because I feel like there's a lot of myths about who we are, and people don't really get the nuance of our lived experience. Um, I started writing poetry when I was 16, and I started writing because I I was just such a, you know, teenage angst, and because I was trying to make sense of the world around me. On top of the fact that I was undocumented, also living in poverty was like a huge kind of thing. And then on top of that, I also turned out, you know, I also am queer, right? So at 16, navigating the social conditionings and my sexuality became like a huge part of the reason why I needed writing. And sadly, you know, for a lot of us who grow up in these kind of communities, we don't have access to like mental health or therapy. But thankfully, I think writing without, you know, unwillingly, became my way, a therapy for me to kind of build my spirit, and make sense of the world around me. So I've been able to kind of, you know, grow into an adult that has a good sense of self, and a good understanding of the things that are around me. I'm gonna read this next poem. Is titled 1991. And 1991 was actually the year that we landed in this country. In this poem, I think I tried to capture like the idea of the American dream, of what the idea that we were gonna land in, and then just the heartbreak of realizing how difficult it is to make it in this country. And if you were around in the 90s, right, we understand the politics of the 90s, right? Right now we have, you know, we're talking about 1994 with the crime bill that happened in 1994, that put a lot of people of color and built, it was like the predecessor that built the prison industrial complex, right? But also in 1994 in California, if you do remember, we have Governor Pete Wilson that initiated Prop 187. And Prop 187 was basically a huge proposition that basically, it was basically the moment that we're living in now, which basically stated that undocumented folks should not have access to public programs such as public hospitals or public schooling, right? And that proposition passed because Californians it fell into the myth of that undocumented folks are the ones stealing jobs or stealing resources. Um, so this poem is 1991, the year that we came. It goes. We did not always have English on our tongues. When we arrived, everything was new to us: the cold weather, tall buildings, concrete roads, street names, bus routes, and stores. We made sense of this new place as best possible. We walked in groups, packs of dark Mexicans walking into stores. At the mall, we stood awkwardly taking pictures under brick brand name stores. We smiled to show the people in our town how far we made it. When we could not pronounce our order at McDonald's, we used our fingers to gesture numbers. We felt so small, lost in this big city. No one would hire us, so we swallowed our pride, rose before the sun, and stood outside of a Home Depot begging for work. They laughed at us, celebrated at our desperation, exploited our necessity. We came home to lay on living room floors in crowded apartments infested with roaches. After rent and bills paid, sent moneygrams home. Over phone calls, we lied how beautiful San Jose is. Our throats burned with our own deception. When we crossed the others, they hated us. Why didn't we warn them of this nightmare? And that was the reality of coming here. I realizing that, you know, the this place is not what it's made out to be. And sadly, I think it's just the reality of a lot of immigrants that are coming here. And I think people, you know, because you're boasting like, oh, I'm in America now, I'm living differently. And you come here and you realize, well, actually, you know, there's a lot of policies and a lot of things here that make it impossible for you um, to make it. Um, and so, but my, you know, all this to say that yes, my life was definitely a challenge. But now that I'm at the other end, right now, that's it's already 2020, and I feel like I'm at the other end now. I feel like I have a great grasp of who I am, and I have a great understanding of politics and the way that it works. Then now at the other end, because I've survived this, and because I'm already living in a different in a different place that I understand agency. What I'm trying to do in my work now is talk about like the fact that we are more than these ideas of who we are, or what you see on the TV, or what people make of us, right? Let me pull up this next thing. Okay. So now I try to incorporate a lot more humor into my work, simply because I feel like my life was like a sitcom growing up. So I want to be able to laugh. I want to be able to celebrate, because if I keep thinking of all these negative things and all these hurdles that I face, I don't think I'm going to be able to live a full life and really fully enjoy it in the way that I do. And as an artist that's very conscious of the way that we get portrayed in mass media, I feel like we need, definitely undocumented people need a mental break, you know, because if you're watching, imagine you're living your whole life and you're aware that you're in this country without documents, and everything that you see on TV is about how you're getting deported. What does that do to your psyche? What does that do to your sense of self? It definitely creates like a ghost that constantly follows you, right? And I didn't want it to continue to do that with my work. I wanted to make people laugh. I wanted to make people like, oh my God, this is such a mess. Like I wanted to kind of cultivate a sense of humor. Because if you know, all of us as people that embody trauma, we create dark humor. That's why you have family members that laugh at things. They're like, I don't know if somebody were walk into this room, they would find that funny. But I figure that's the best medicine. So I'm going to share a little bit about, I have a one-man show that's supposed to come out, and I've been studying a lot of stand-up comedy. So I'll share an excerpt of that, and then I'll do another video that we produced, and then we can get into Q&A should you have any questions. Okay, this is called, it's Prieto. My play is titled Prieto, which is Spanish word for like dark skin. I'm originally from Guerrero, so you know I'm one of the darker Mexicans. If you don't know anything about, you know, Mexican phenotypes, like we're as diverse as, you know, the US, because we have so much migration or different cultures that influence who we are. Prieto. I don't know where you've been for the last 10 years, but migration is a hot topic. It is trendy. It is in. Being a citizen is so overrated. If you want free press, you should bring your social and be a rebel like me. Live your life as undocumented. I have no memory of my crossing, but for the sake of this show, I will entertain you with something more dramatic, because really, who's going to check public records? It's not like you can. We're undocumented. It's an August night in 1991. My abuela is the mastermind behind this whole plan. My abuelo, like always, is drunk. My mother crossed 2 years prior, so she finally saved enough money to send for us. She hired a coyote. For those of you who are culturally impaired, I don't mean a coyote. I mean a human smuggler to get us across. When I say human smuggler, I'm sure you're imagining a character out of Narcos or some badass drug cartel leader, but our smuggler was a señora. Straight up, this lady looked like she could be selling tamales on the corner of 24th and Mission. So don't typecast immigrants, because that sweet old lady selling you those delicious tamales could be a human smuggler. We're a group of 13, mostly men, except for my abuela, my brother, and me. Before crossing, my abuelo had a going away party of sorts, so he's crossing the border hungover. I know what you're thinking. How irresponsible. But when you think about it, when you're about to leave your country, your land, your whole life behind, just to come to a place you know nothing about, what else is there to do than to drink up? Lord knows if I'm about to cross the desert like some Fear Factor challenge, I'm gonna need me a couple of shots. Once we crossed the desert is when things got interesting. Being that I'm 3 years old, my abuela's main concern is me crying and giving away this whole Operation Wetback. They have to stick the four of us under the backseat of a car, some human Tetris type shit. These adults think that the best preventative measure to avoid me making any noise is to give me NyQuil. So the basic plot of my migration story is that I didn't even want to be here. I was drugged, kidnapped, and brought here. Eat your heart out, Lifetime. You would think that this would be enough dramatic details to convince conservatives of my humanity, but they always want more. They always need a little more. So cue in the Sarah McCollum animal cruelty commercial. This is Yosimar Reyes. He's a DACA beneficiary. Yosimar's a dreamer. When Yosimar crossed the border at 3 years old, he did not know he was breaking the law. He thought he was coming to Disneyland. Call your Congress people now and save Yosimar's life. Truth be told, I feel like if I was a dog getting deported, conservatives would be outraged. I could see the headlines now. All dogs go to heaven, free them all, cages are cruel. If there were masses of dogs being deported on the daily, immigration detention centers would be abolished by now. When reporters asked me, what was it like? Did you have to ride La Bestia to get here? Were the drug cartels right behind you? Please tell us about the violence. My scholarship response is always, it was a dark, gloomy, typical morning, typical in a Mexican morning, because we're such a developing country that the sun doesn't shine. My abuela heard a whisper in the wind, and it was La Virgen de Guadalupe. My daughter, you are to migrate north. This child of yours is the Messiah, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He is the chosen one. It would be best if you take him to the United States. This child is on a mission to denounce imperialism and eradicate white supremacy. Only he can stop this. So pack your things and go. So at the age of 3 years old, I packed my belongings in cardboard boxes tied by shoestrings, and I began my pilgrimage. The only fancy thing about the Taylor Oaks apartments was its name. There really needs to be a cultural study about how all the projects have these scenic pastoral names. Think about it. The Acorn Project, Sleepy Meadows, Sunnyside Apartments. I have a theory that the more scenic the name, the more roaches the apartment comes with. Undocumented people are the original inventors of Airbnbs. And I will repeat that again. Undocumented people are the original inventors of Airbnbs. I swear some white dude stole that shit from us and started a whole company. Because growing up, my abuela used to rent out the 2 bedrooms in our apartment and we stayed in the living room. The only difference is that these immigrants didn't leave reviews. Later, when I attended San Francisco State, I found out that the hippie white kids called that shit a co-op or communal living. All that shit Virginia Woolf was talking about, for a woman to write, she needs her own money and a room of her own. If only Virginia would have told that to my abuela, I have no time or space to think. On top of the fact that we stayed in the living room, my abuela had the bright idea of starting a soup kitchen. Call it a niche market, but my old lady was smart. She knew that most of the men in our apartment, most of the apartments in our building were rented out by migrant men, most from the states of like Puebla, Guerrero, and Oaxaca, the dark Mexicans. Since most worked all day, they didn't have someone to cook for them, so she took on the job. Their bodies crowded our small living room. These fools would take the liberties like changing the channel to their favorite novela. Basically, my house was an INS hotspot. Had we been raided, we would have been around like the cucarachas when you spray actual raid on the areas they congregate in. Oh my God, you get it? Raid, INS raid, cucaracha raid. Mexicans are the cucarachas this country wants to get rid of. Guess what though? Cucarachas survived the extinction of dinosaurs, so that's us, resilient. Another fun fact, INS stands for Immigration Natural Services, which post 9/11 we now call ICE. The men would tell stories about their families they left behind. It started out with one asking me to read a letter he got from his employer, and soon me into running my own little EOP office for these immigrants. Oyes, ¿por qué no me enseñas inglés? What do you want to know? A ver cómo se dice yo lo soy por barato. It's easy. Se dice I can do it for cheaper. I have nothing better to do, so I take out the challenge, I grab some markers, and begin teaching basic sentences. I was like a little Michelle Pfeiffer with my little cohort of immigrant dangerous minds. Every day I have a new sentence. I write words with a marker in unison and have them repeated. Initially they stumble, but eventually they get the hang of it. I learn how to make resumes and talk to the potential employers on the phone. Yes, this is Mr. Reyes on the line. Oh, Fernando. Yes, he's an excellent worker. He's punctual, has great attitude, and never complains. You won't regret hiring him. Kike is the most persistent in me wanting to learn English. He says he's gonna pay me if I keep teaching him, so I steal extra language art sheets from school for the lessons. The thing about being a translator at 10 or 11 years old is that these immigrants forget that you're also a kid. Translating at the doctor was particularly hard. How do you say urinary tract infection in español? Abuelita, dice el doctor que tienes una urinary tract infection. ¿Una qué? A UTA, abuela. No sé cómo se dice en español. ¿Cómo que no sabes? ¿Para qué vas a la escuela? But abuela, I'm in 4th grade. This señor went to medical school. Calling the cops was the worst. You know how traumatizing it is to call the cops on your own uncle while he's standing right next to you? 911, what's the emergency? Hi, my tia told me to call the cops because she doesn't speak English, but she says she wants to put my uncle in jail. What's the problem? Tia, dice la operadora que cuál es el problema. Excuse me, ma'am. My tia says she wants to put him in jail because he's a deadbeat dad and a cheater. I'm so sorry, Theo. Ma'am, my Theo says he would rather be in jail than spend one more day in this miserable marriage. Ma'am, do you know how long this is gonna be? I have to finish my book report for school tomorrow. In 5th grade, we read the Diary of Anne Frank, and I thought to myself, if this homegirl could write about living in an attic hiding from the Nazis, I got stories about living in the living room hiding from INS. My initial journal entries were about my daily annoyances, kids I hate in school, abuelo snoring, sharing the floor with my abuela, the roaches. Eventually, I began writing about my secret crushes. I knew there was a danger in writing, so I would go to my secret place to write, the bathroom. I would lock the door, sit on the toilet, and I began, Dear God. I had recently watched The Color Purple, so I got the idea from Celie to write letters to God. Dramatic, I know, but that shit is an effective writing prompt, okay? Dear God, I think I'm gay. I don't know what gay is, but I know every time I walk through the underwear aisle at Kmart, I get tantalizing thoughts. I try walking to the women's bra section to see if I get tantalized as well, but nada. I feel nothing. Am I broken? Somehow I knew that my secrets weren't safe. Even though no one in this apartment spoke or read English, I would write in my journal entry, then rip the pages from my notebook and I would burn them. For a queer kid, growing up in the hood wasn't easy. It didn't help that my name was Yosimar. Why couldn't my mom name me something more basic and boyish like Juan or even Pedro? Growing up, everyone thought that I was named after that stupid novela Marimar, so they all would run and sing the tune of la novela, Yosimar, au, costeñita soy. It also didn't help that my nickname was Gordo, which translates to fat. Like, come on. Don't y'all know that out in the streets you need to be respected? How the hell am I supposed to be respected when my name sounds like the protagonist of a telenovela and you guys gave me a fat phobic nickname? My family was really my own worst enemies. And I'll leave it at that. um, so I think for me, one of the things that I'm trying to make sense of is like the way that um yeah, sometimes I started viewing like all these challenges that I had as like like an obstacle course or just like anecdotes that I thought were really hilarious that I think a lot of immigrants experience once you survive them, because in the moment they're not really like that funny, right? They're very like, oh, traumatizing, and you know, they're very hard to conceptualize, but once you survive them and you're like at the other side, I think you start seeing the humor in the narrative. And for me, I think that was like the biggest thing for me was like, I need to figure out a way to find my power, even though I don't have any kind of institutional power or anything. Not even financial, economic, right? Because you are like trying to survive with the bare minimum. But thankfully, I always had a good examples around me. One of the things I talk about a lot is that oftentimes when we do share stories of undocumented subjects, it's always like a deficit or something that we lack. But I'm trying to break out of that because I really think that it takes a level of genius to live this long and to survive this long in a country that makes policies so you basically self-deport, right? Like it takes like a level of genius to build a life without any access and still continue to thrive. And that's why I feel like we need to start tapping more into that and talking a little bit more about that power that we do have that oftentimes does not get reflected in the conversations that we have about us. So let me introduce you to the wild people that brought me here. This is my grandma, my grandpa. They're the ones that brought me to the country. Um, and I love them with all my heart. My grandpa, you know, what this in my play you'll see, but my grandfather ended up returning home. He was no longer he didn't no longer wanted to be here. And you know, I feel like even now with social distancing, I think it goes without saying that, you know, undocumented people have been living in a social distancing world, right? Because we can't travel home, we can't see our relatives. And you know, there's people out here complaining that, you know, that they want to see their friends, but you know, that's my grandma. She's been social distancing since we got here, so like 30 plus years, because she can't be able to see that. My grandfather sadly passed away. But I think that was also the sobering for me of like this conditioning that I do have, is that we couldn't bury him, and that we had to witness his funeral through FaceTime, which I think right now in these predicaments, a lot of people are kind of witnessing that. They can't even, the sacred act of burying someone, your dad or someone that you love, is impossible because of what we're witnessing, right? Um, I have something called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And the thing with DACA too, right now, it's just like, this is why I feel like my work is definitely needed, because we're definitely under constant attack. We earlier this year we were celebrating the Supreme Court decision that terminating the DACA program was unconstitutional. But sadly, we celebrated too early because, you know, Homeland Security was like, psych. UCIS came back and was like, actually, yeah, we're actually going to make this program now a 1 year program instead of 2 years. So in essence, every 2 years, I would pay the government $495. They give me a work permit. I could work and pay taxes. And because they don't want this program anymore, they wanted to fizzle out. Now they're making it 1 year. And sadly, I think that if we have a second term president, then this program will definitely be terminated. And that basically means that people like me who came, you know, been here since young, went to school, I went to college, who are excelling in their careers, were actually hit like a brick wall, and we could no longer be exercising in our professions. Um, I was born in 1988. I just turned 32 in September. So the other thing about like the narratives around undocumented is that people say like, "Oh my God, these kids, they're kids, these poor kids." But the reality is I'm grown. Like I've been waiting for something for so long. Like I'm grown now. Like I don't, you know, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm originally from the state of Guerrero, Mexico. So this is Mexican geography. Our state is really down there, which is a beautiful state. I was actually I had the opportunity to go back to Mexico about almost, yeah, almost 3 years, 3 years ago, almost four. And I went through a program called Advanced Parole, which was part of the DACA program, in which you could apply to like an educational program. You can apply through work, or you can apply through like a humanitarian cause. If someone was dying, they could allow you to go back. And I was able to actually go through a program. Sadly, that program doesn't exist anymore, but I did take advantage of it. And it was amazing just to see where I come from, some place that I've never known, like this mythological place to me. And to be able to experience that was definitely amazing. But definitely, I realized really soon how Americanized I was. Simply because I feel like I got in condition to being, you know, high maintenance, because there's certain things that you do have in the US that, you know, you wouldn't probably have at a rural town. And life is just so different. But I'm so glad that I'm able to have that experience, because at least I know this place that my family left. This is a picture of my family. My two younger sisters were born here. I was born in Mexico with my older brother, so we're like both undocumented, and my younger siblings are citizens, which is I think pretty common in a lot of families. When you have like mixed status family members, right? You have one that's a citizen, one's a resident, one's on a visa, one's um undocumented. So you have like this kind of array or spectrum of statuses in this country. Um, One of the things that happens a lot to me is people ask me how to cross the border, which is a very effective writing prompt. Should you be a writer and wanting to get into storytelling, imagine yourself crossing the border. But I don't. Honestly, I have no recollection of crossing the border. My first memories in kindergarten, and my first memory is reading Clifford the Big Red Dog and wondering why the dog was so big. Like, why is this dog so big? Like, that's the only thing that I remember of my childhood memories. So my life was pretty. We came in '91, but my life was pretty Americanized. Like everything I read. By the time I entered grade school, I already spoke English based on TV. My older cousins were already kind of teaching me how this country works. So I never really had a problem immersing into American culture. I feel like I was already part of it. And I was always a translator. I was always a kid that they would, like, if somebody had just come from Mexico, they would sit up next to me so I can translate things for them. So I think being able to be the translator also gave me a really sense of my power, because I had so much power over these adults that they knew that if they got me mad, I'm not gonna translate for you. Like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And so clearly by these fashions I have here with this little cowboy look, it would be evident that I would be out here into dressing up and wearing clothes, right? Wearing like statement pieces. Um, but yeah, my upbringing was very much that. And it's interesting though, because the play, I'm talking about my childhood, but one of the things that I do remember as a kid is like what things with kids is that there's no language to describe your predicament. Things just happen as they are. It's not until you become adult that you become conscious and you start acquiring language to name things, right? To name the predicaments that you exist in. But as a kid, I remember having the most fun in my neighborhood. Like I had like such a splendid childhood, but never did I grow up thinking I was missing anything. But now that I'm an adult, I'm like, oh, maybe I would have had different outcomes should I had access. I talk a lot about poverty and how poverty polices imagination. When you're poor, you don't picture or visualize yourself in other situations, in other realms, right? When you're poor, you only visualize things within your immediate need. So things that are like accessible immediate needs. And I argue that the same way that poverty is a conditioning, I argue that being undocumented is also a conditioning, because there's nothing undocumented about your body, about your spirit, about your essence, right? So in that same regard, your status as undocumented also polices your imagination. That's why if you come across a lot of students who are undocumented or like, oh, I don't want to dream too big because, the deception of me not achieving that dream might, make me really doubt my potential. But I like to remind people, right? Like we need to start breaking those barriers that we set for ourselves, because we should imagine ourselves living lives that are examples of the ways we thrive, right? Living lives that are abundant. So that's what I try to do a little bit in my work. Like, how do we have a radical imagination? So we're imagining ourselves in positions of power or positions of agency. Where do we have power in selecting the way things impact us? And I'm proud of this picture so much. My grandparents recycled me. My grandparents raised me on recycling bottles and cans, which is a very interesting profession. When people, and even now that I have language, I'm like, my grandparents were like eco-friendly because they recycled bottles and cans. But I'm definitely proud of this labor, because I think a lot of times also, because undocumented labor is so used to being invisibilized and not praised. Um, and oftentimes when we're so busy on survival mode and surviving, we lack to acknowledge our talents, right? We don't call it talent. Like if your mom is a barber, if your mom does flower arrangements, if your mom, sews or even cooks, right? We lack to call that a talent. We just call it like, oh, that's something she does, right? But one of the things that I'm trying to do now is acknowledge the talent and the genius, because I think we also need to work on boosting the self-esteem of a lot of folks that might not feel that they are worthy based on being vilified on a daily. So yeah, my grandparents were definitely entrepreneurs because they developed their own route in which restaurants would give them recyclables, and they would recycle and basically build a life from there. Um, and so I'm very aware that it's important for me to acknowledge that as well. And now, they don't, my grandma doesn't have to do that anymore, right? Because now it's very interesting that based on recycling, now I was able to go to school and study and kind of find my voice as a poet, as a writer. And now it goes with, it's very rare to say some that your profession is to read poems or to write poetry. But now, we're at the other end where, things are slowly, not that we're like making hella bank, but we're slowly reaching a level that is, a level of a people where we don't have to, struggle anymore. Um, and the last one, the question that I get asked about is if I'm afraid, and this is a question that a lot of undocumented people get asked all the time. Are you afraid that they're gonna come after you? Are you afraid if the president wins again, what's gonna happen to you? Do you have a plan B? But I think I've been asked that question so much that now I'm not. I genuinely can say like I'm really not scared. I'm not scared simply because I've already witnessed the power of our collective power, right? When undocumented, the things that we have now are because undocumented folks have pushed it, right? Now we have undocumented resource centers throughout the country. Now we have like some sort of visualization. Now we have like examples of people that made it. So it's not that I'm afraid. I think at this point it's more of an annoyance. Like, can you just leave us alone? Can we just have like 1 month, 1 week, 1 day where y'all don't, hate on us for being cute? Can that be like like today is, I'm declaring the day that we're gonna leave undocumented people alone. Because that's definitely what we need at this point. And based on that, I started writing a lot of love poems for undocumented people. And that's kind of what I've been kind of centering more of. How do I create more work of that embodies that? Let me see if I can pull that up right now. But if you have any questions, you can bring them up, put them in the chat, and then we can get into them. But let me see if I can pull that video up for you. Oh, let's see. Doo-doo-doo-doo.
Yes, if you all have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, or just unmute yourselves. Thank you, Yosimar, so far. You hear me.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm really talking a lot. Like this is a marathon.
I don't have any questions, Josimar, but I just wanted to say I really enjoyed. I couldn't get in. I got a little bit late into your presentation, but I really can empathize with the nicknames that you said your parents called you, because my nickname was, we all had nicknames. Chubby, Bucky, Boo Boo Saya. We were all nicknames in our family, but my nickname never stayed with me. But when I got in high school, in high school, you started liking boys and stuff, and you're walking home with your group of friends, and your mother calls out, Chata, ven que pa acá para ayuda la ropa, and you don't want to answer, and then you tell, and then say, who they calling? I never admitted to that name. And so I found out what it meant, but she said she felt so bad, but it means like a pug nose, Chata. And but my mom, we spoke slang, Spanish slang, but I knew who she was calling, and I would answer it if I wasn't with a friend. But
hide.
names do stay with you, and they do bring back memories. Yes.
Yeah, I think, and it's the thing is that like during that time, it's very like it's embarrassing, but then you're older, like, okay, it's actually like a love name, like it's somebody that loves me,
Yes.
calls me that. So
Yeah, so
it's
it was
not.
her love name for me until we both found out together what it meant, but she didn't even know. She just liked the way it sounded.
Oh my god.
Be careful.
Great. Let me share this video, and then yeah, if you have any other questions, we can get into it. But we developed this campaign with an organization at the time that I was working with called Define American. And basically one of the things with this campaign that was more important to us is like, how do we start building narratives of joy, especially because we were living during such a time when there's just so much happening, that it was important for us to figure out a way to develop that. So this is kind of the poem that we created. And then yeah, and then if you have anything, we can get into it. Let's see. I love my undocumented people. I love us because every day we wake up to a country that hates us. We wake up, give thanks to God, and go to work. Watch the news, hear how our own TVs vilify us. We change the channel and pray that tomorrow will be a better day for us. When they give us a little breathing room, we make the most of it. We're so grateful that often we forget we deserve better. That all this mess is not our fault. We stay low on the radar. Want peace. Want to exist without the added stress of having to be public about where our spirits ache. We just want to go to work to feed our families, yet we become scapegoats to a system that is addicted to exploiting the poor. I love my undocumented people because the way our spirits are toyed with, you need some unfathomable strength. I love us because we have constantly had to prove our humanity and constantly done it beautifully. Because to stay human under these conditions, you have to have an understanding of beauty. Love us. Even when our stories are manipulated and exploited. Even when we are presented as gloom and doom narratives. I love us. Because at the end of the day, somehow we always manage to make something out of nothing. I love my undocumented people because being undocumented is not political, it's not physical, it is a condition created to keep us from smiling. But look at us, thriving. So yeah, this is kind of like where, let me see, let me stop this video. Let me start my again. Yeah, this is kind of like the whole method behind, or the behind my process as a creator. And now I think right now it's awesome because right now I think my work is definitely getting out there and people are definitely picking it up. I know people are using it in different curriculums and universities, which is really awesome because, you know, it all started with like me thinking that I didn't have like a voice in this, but now I'm really blessed and I feel very honored that people are finding its own way into people's lives, and people are using it to for their students. If anything, I think to build the confidence of people that are so used to getting beat up, but now are, you know, um, are excelling. So I know we're getting close to 12, so I don't know if people have questions before. I know there's a couple of people that are going to read some poems that we're going to open it up to. So, yeah.
Yosimar, I just wanted to say I absolutely love your energy, your vibe. It gives me life. But I'm not gonna let you hate on Marimad because that was a that was a telenovela I grew up with my mom watching,
Oh
and I
my
never
God.
really fully learned how to speak Spanish. But that was one of those that we shared a moment together. But I will say this about nicknames. So my mom told me when she was a kid that her parents used to call her Chavalita, and it would like piss her off to no extent, you know? And so I remember when I learned that nickname, I started telling my mom it just to like make her mad or whatever. But those nicknames, like, they like stick with you, and you sometimes like have this like, for you, they feel like a negative connotation, you know? Like,
Mhm.
why call me that? But at the same time, it's, you know, it's it's the family. Like, that's what they do.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's a universality of nicknames. So I think that in general, like these anecdotes, like it's really funny because you put these little in writing, you put these little anecdotes that might be specific to you, and then it triggers people because like, oh my God, I remember that too. So hopefully that's what's happening in the work, right? That people are finding their own meaning to it too. Gracias, thank you.
And did someone else have a question? I thought someone had a question. How has it been like for you? Like, I think you talked about you're quarantining with your family right now, and you're still doing your work and like trying to find joy and like navigating, like, you're quarantining with your grandma. So what has that been like for you? The ups and the downs and the laughs and the
I think within family, right? It's just like, oh Lord Jesus, I'm back. I mean, I think it's been good. I think me and my grandmother had a great relationship. I just feel like, I feel hard. It's harder for her because she's older and she's more high risk. So she can't, there's no, what activities, there's only so many like so much telenovelas she can consume. But I'm hoping that she's like getting it out of her system. So when we do get out of here, she never wants to watch one again. Um, but yeah, just trying to figure out activities. And I think I try to incorporate a lot of elders into the work because I feel like when you're getting older, you definitely become a little bit more codependent on doing certain things. And I think when you're young, you're so used to like living your life on your own and making choices. And, if I want to move somewhere, I can move that. But I'm very aware that as a caretaker, I can't do that without having an impact on, another human being's life. So I think trying to make peace with the fact that it's a great thing that I'm taking care of my grandma, but it's definitely very difficult trying to navigate my own decisions with the things that she has going on. But she loves that I'm here. She loves that I'm here. But yeah.
Thank you. I think April, did you have a question? Oh no, that was just me with the mouse over your thing. Sorry.
I think there were a few questions in the chat if you wanted to check those out. Like Susan asked one, and it looks like Kendall did. Like Susan asked what your grandma's name is, Yosimar, and we could start there.
Yeah, my grandma's name is Mardonia. I think we have the Mar because we're from like a coastal place in Mexico. So we put Mar. My sister's name's Marlene and my brother's name is Marcos. Have you seen people be deported? Not necessarily. Well, I mean, I witnessed it within the neighborhood, right? Because I have a lot of folks that um, tell me their situations, and I try to help as much as possible. But I think experience like an ICE raid or anything like that, thankfully, no, I have not. But I'm very aware that like people get caught up in loopholes. So I'm very cognizant of that. But I've seen more people make the choice to leave, which is the biggest thing, right? Making the selection to leave. And just because they're tired or they want like start a new life or they just want to leave, but not necessarily like experience that. Let's see. Love hearing about how you are in meetings and you can hear your grandma watching La Rosa de Guadalupe. Yes, in the background. Also, how she doesn't want to throw anything away and wants to keep everything in her home. Yeah, I talk a lot about how my grandma, one of the things that I've been doing, I write when you're in quarantine, you want to do home improvement projects. And home improvement for me is getting rid of things. I am a Virgo, so I love simplicity. I love organization. I feel like your room, every single thing that is in your room should serve a purpose. There should not be, I don't like, the hoarding or none of that. So I have, one of the biggest things that I do clash with my grandma is that I love throwing things away or recycling things or giving them away to a home that would better be used to them. So I think right now, I've been in the process of conditioning her to like, hey, you can let go. You don't wear these shoes. We can get rid of them. And if you ever need them, we can buy new ones. So that's been very interesting to see that. But she's cute. She understands, but it's just funny too. She's like, you love throwing everything away. I'm like, yeah, because no one's using it. But yeah.
I think there's another question for me from Estela.
Let's see.
So Estela runs our Dream Center at Cuesta College.
Yosimar, what do you think of the family separations, and don't you think we will have an immigration reform sometime soon? It's so heartbreaking, right, to witness these things and to witness these atrocities. Honestly, this is the moment we're going to be reading, like back in the day, the way that we kind of read about Japanese internment camps, the way that we read about all these things, and then we're shook and shocked that these things happen under our noses, under our eyes. These are the same things that we're going to be reading in the future. And then people, your grandkids are going to ask you, like, what was happening? Do you remember that? And we're going to have to admit that we lived through that and that we put up with that, right? Because it's true. Like it's I think like just the apathy that is just super daunting. And I hold like it feels like you don't have no power. But again, we're amidst an election, so at least voting is very important, and having conversations with, because we all have family members that might say things, or you're like, oh, that's just him, or that's just what they do. Really kind of trying to educate them a little bit better of what they think. In my work, one of the things that I stopped doing is trying to justify or trying to convince people to like undocumented people, because there's some people that really hold wholehearted feelings, and I strongly believe that. I always say that if you're someone that believes in separating families and caging kids, there's nothing I can do to kind of convince you to like us or to do anything. Like that's definitely like a spiritual quest, or there's something there in your psyche that keeps you from really understanding the impact of your words or what you choose to share online. That's very interesting. And sadly, for immigration reform, I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I think right now with the immigration policy, the damage has been done that it's going to take a like 2-term president to reverse and get us back to where we were at one point. So I think for me right now, what I'm doing as my career is like trying to build as much as possible. Should that happen, that I need to return or build a new life somewhere else, then I can do that, right? And I'm really thinking of that too, because at some point you get tired, and you reach a level that you're like, I can excel somewhere else. But sadly, I think right now people are realizing that this place is not necessarily the best. If you think about it, it's not really like that popping here. Like if you get a lot of Americans don't have a savings account. People are living paycheck to paycheck. If you get into a car accident, you don't have universal health care. So you're gonna have to do a GoFundMe to fund whatever medical bills you have to pay. On top of that, rent is super high and it's only gonna increase. So you're getting pushed out of your neighborhoods to go live somewhere that you don't want to live. So I think right now what we're facing up against is an economy that values millionaires and trillionaires over actual people that are trying to live. So that's why I tell people, if you can divest from Amazon and shop locally and shop with small mom and pop shops, you should definitely do that. Even your books, you should definitely buy them at the local bookstore. Really be conscious of the way you spend your money, because there's certain people that became trillionaires during a pandemic. Hi, I'm Andrea for the Health Center. The stigma around mental health is a huge barrier in reaching our Hispanic population. What are strategies we can use more inclusive services and make our Latino students feel more comfortable? Yeah, I think mental health, obviously we're all going through something right now. Like this is a historical moment. Like we are not only are we living in a pandemic, there's also the Black Lives Matter movement. There's also like a movement for the inclusion of other people of color. There's an inclusion of trying to get our stories out there. But I think for me, it's like definitely being more aware of like how do we talk about feelings and how do we talk about not being so dismissive in what people how people are processing things. I think the biggest thing is productivity, the stress that comes with, especially with students, productivity, right? Like you feel inadequate if you get a B, or you feel inadequate if you don't have enough time to get a paper in. But honestly, I was always been the type of student that if it was between sleeping and a B, I can take the B if I slept, but I think it's just definitely making a culture that's more aware of that. Like right now, even productivity, it's so wild that now, the research shows that your workload has become 45 minutes longer, even now that we're on Zoom. So being really aware of that, if you're like someone monitoring a meeting, or if you're someone that's a professor, or someone that's teaching a class, really making people aware, like, listen, if you think a 15-minute break, like take it, like it's not the end of the world if you're gonna a break. Because I think right now it's definitely how do we slow that down. And if you're not as productive in your whole day, say you didn't answer those 3 emails that you were supposed to, just listen, I apologize, like I'm trying to get my life together. Being aware of that, and again, asking for help. I think like that's the other thing. Boundaries are a huge thing. Like how I was watching a video that tells us how do we create boundaries, like, hey, thank you for scheduling that, but I don't have the capacity. Like really, even for ourselves, like really checking in with yourself what your capacity is at. I'm very, now I'm more even capacity to hear your friends drama, like, oh, thank you, girl, thank you for sharing, I appreciate that. I'm not at a capacity to do that. I think really setting boundaries is definitely very important, especially now. There's so much happening, y'all. Like, really, really take care of yourselves because we need you for the long haul. Yeah, somebody put my website there so you can check a lot of my work on the website. A lot of the videos are there. Should you have somebody that you might want to share them with, or the poems, you can definitely feel free to share those. And if I'm of any resource, you can always hit me up through my website, and I try to be as responsive as possible. But yeah.
Question. Sorry, I know it's past 12, but like I really wanted to ask, I know being a part of the Mexican community, and then also being, queer and undocumented, like what, and a writer, a poet, what has that been like for you? Because I mean, obviously in la cultura mexicana, it's not a very easy thing to talk about, just in general, the Latinx community, and
I think
being open about it.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's been very different for me simply because I'm just so, like I always try to make myself as accessible to people. We were just talking about this yesterday. I'm so lenient to las señoras that don't understand, because I also know that you got to meet people where they're at. And of course, I mean, I try to respect people so people respect me. But I'm a lot more lenient with folks that I might not understand the language, especially with queer language, because we have so many freaking words that people are just like, oh, I don't understand. So I try to be more lenient as possible. But I think because people have seen that I've been cultivating and doing work within my community, and people have seen that I'm helping people out, that people are very much more willing to just be like, hey, listen, the respect factor. My grandma had that growing up. When I was growing up, nobody messed with her because she was an old lady in a neighborhood, right? Because, it's going to look bad if you're messing with an old lady. But I think in the same regard, I think I've developed that kind of respect within my community, that people know like that, I'm here to be of service, not necessarily to cause any harm. So I think that's giving me a little bit more access. And because I have that respect, now I can have these conversations with family members or people that might not understand. And now they actually know a queer person that's not the pun of the joke, or they know a queer person that's not out here for their own entertainment, but like, okay, we're gonna respect them because this person's helping me. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience.
Thank you so much. Now I think if anybody does have any final questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We will move on to our segment where if folks want to share a poem, something they wrote, or maybe something they really enjoy by another poet. I know we have 2 folks lined up to read. Our first one is Nancy. Excuse me if I say your last name wrong, but Nancy, are you here with us today? I don't know if she's here. Is she? Do you see her, Allison? No. I mean, Allison. Ali. I'm sorry. I was just like reading.
No, it's okay.
No.
Unless her screen name is different.
Yes,
Okay.
if you're here.
Because I know she's going to read something by Pablo Neruda. But we can go on to Susan. I know you're here. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for signing up to read. Is she here? Did she leave?
Oh no.
She was here just a minute ago.
She was here a minute ago.
Yeah, if not, I mean, I'd love to ask Yosimar. If nobody else wants to read, I'd love to ask Yosimar if you have something on hand to continue reading for us, or just anything else you want to share.
Yeah, I'll do this poem. So right now, a lot of my work is coming back simply because we're missing an election, and so many things are, we're just processing so many things. And there's so much at stake right now. So if you could definitely vote, you should definitely, especially early voting is super important, because one of the things that we're witnessing is that, especially in a lot of people of color communities, that's why you stand on those voting lines so long, because we all know that those lines are actually voter suppression. So if you weren't aware that why is my polling place so long? It's because there's a reason, and it's strategic, right? So if you can definitely vote early, you should definitely do that. That way you don't have to stand in those lines. But now you need to watch out for those ballot boxes that are not really ballot boxes. So definitely do your research where you drop your ballot off. This poem is titled "A Poem So the Weight of This Country Does Not Crush You." Some days you may wake up sad. Some days you may wake up frustrated. Some days you may wake up tired. Some days you may wonder if it's worth it. Some days you may question your own growth. Some days you may think how immense the world is, to be caged in this country, to be subjugated to all this abuse. Some days you just want to breathe. And baby, I'm here to remind you to sit in those moments, to sit in that whirlpool, but just know that there are people like me picking up the load when you can't. There are people like me pushing so the weight of this country does not crush you. There are people like you who will fight when I can't. And we will take turns pushing against these walls. I got your back and you got mine. In the scheme of things, does anything else matter? Even if our fight is unfruitful, we will depart with our dignity intact. We'll depart knowing that this country is losing a prized possession. This country is losing the gift of our resilience. We will watch them as they tear into each other's skins and thank the heavens we never turned into beasts like them. Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Again, you can check out all of the work on my website. And yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions for him?
I have a poem I can read if you want.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And if anyone's attending our book club at 1, this is going to be a repeat, but this is Brown Girl Dreaming. It's written by a Black American author, but her concept is much broader than that, and she named the title poem Brown Girl Dreaming to be much more inclusive, and I think it's helpful. This is Jacqueline Woodson. Who is this brown girl dreaming? My teacher wants to know. Staring out the window so, head in hands and eyes, gone from here. Where are you, dear? Come back to the classroom, my pretty brown girl. I fear you're halfway around the world. Where is that mind of yours now? Outside, the winter stabs through the air, sneaks past the classroom window pane, and there beneath a truck, a frozen bird being sniffed by a stray cat. I don't yet know the word disdain, but in this moment, the world feels far away. I dream of stepping out into it one day to rest my feet in unfamiliar sand, to touch the hand of a boy or a girl on the other side, where it's nighttime now or summer there. And maybe return to this place, a different girl, with just a trace of who I used to be, echoing somewhere nearby. And as the teacher goes on, her words are suddenly becoming a poem that I might sing on an orange afternoon inside a room where people will know my name.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Denise. Is there anybody else who would like to read? Maybe some original work. Maybe there's a secret writer in here somewhere, or just Estela, ¿le gustaría leer algo?
Ay, Dios mío. Podemos cantar, pero poemas no sé ninguno. I don't know any poems, but we can sing a little bit if you want. Half of a song.
You want to look, I heard you sing, so look, I would be honored.
Okay, Yosimar, thank you for your words. Thank you for your presentation. We're so blessed to have you and have these type of conversations. And as I was listening to you, if I cry, forgive me, but I started thinking that my parents brought me here in search of the famous American dream. And it feels to me right now that it's just slipping away. It's just farther and farther. So I would like to share just a little piece of a song that talks about how you feel being not in your country because you sacrificed so much and your family sacrificed so much to bring you here. And it just came from my heart right now. I just felt I needed to just sing a little piece of a song that says, qué lejos estoy del cielo donde he nacido. Qué lejos estoy del cielo donde he nacido. Inmensa nostalgia invade mi pensamiento. Al verme tan sola y triste como un lamento, quisiera llorar, quisiera morir de sentimiento. Oh tierra del sol, suspiro por verte. Ahora que lejos yo vivo sin luz, sin amor. Y al verme tan sola y triste como un lamento, quisiera llorar, quisiera morir de sentimiento, añorando nuestra patria, nuestro México querido.
Thank you.
You gave me goosebumps, Stella. Beautiful, beautiful. Your songs are always so beautiful.
Thank you for sharing, Estela. That was very beautiful, brave, and just, I know that was not easy, so thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. Yeah, so I don't know if there's any other questions, anybody who wants to read. I'd read, but you know, I joke that
I have a poem that I wanted to share. It's a Chicano. It's called A Chicano Poem, and it's by Lorna de Cervantes. I don't know if you've heard of it. A Chicano Poem. They try to take our words, steal away our hearts under their imaginary shawls, their laws, their libros, their libranos, señores. No more. They try to take away our spirit in the rock, the mountain, the living waters. They try to steal our languages, our grandmothers' packs, our magna cartas for their own serfs. They raised the land and raised a constitution, declared others 3/5 a human being, snapped shackles, cut off a foot, raped our grandmothers into near mute oblivion. They burned the sacred codices, and the molted goddess rose anew. In their flames, they try to silence a nation, try to send the people back to the four corners of the world. They drew a line in the sand and dared us to cross it. Try to peel off our skins, Zaitote, screaming through our indigenous consciousness. They tried to brand America into our unread, flesh the skull and crossbone flying at half-mast. They try to put their eggs in our basket, try to weave the native out of us with their drunken drugs, try to switch their mammy raised offspring, beaded and unshaved, as the colorless pea under our mattresses. In a cultural bait and switch, hook and bait, they try to take our words, give us the Spanish translation for pain, serve us the host of follow fields on a china plate, striped us from the germ and seed, fed us in a steady diet of disease and famine. Where is the word for tomorrow to the dead? When is our kingdom come? They claim our reclamations, our reparations, a thing of our imaginations. I discovered this truth to be self-evident. In the beginning, we were here. I declare us here today. And speaking by Lorna D. Cervantes.
Thank you, Dee. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to read or share some words? No, too shy. Thank you, Yosimar. Not sure if you have any last words or just, I don't know, last poem. This is always me just trying to hear your beautiful poetry, but that's just me.
No, I just want to express my gratitude. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your morning to come conversate and, listen to some of the work. And yeah, and for just supporting. I think it means a lot that, I think it gives folks, like me, a reassurance, because sometimes it gets really daunting, but just know that we're all in this together and that collectively, right? I think that's the hope that, collectively there's people out here, with our little a rock trying to build the mountain. So thank you so much for that and for being here. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you, Yosimar.
Thank you, Yosimar. And today, this evening at 6 o'clock, we will be hosting the session in Spanish. Everyone is welcome to join us. It is open to the community. We did specifically promote this to our ELD population, our communities that are completing their GEDs. Maybe they're more comfortable speaking in Spanish or listening in Spanish. But either way, you're welcome to join us. So please do, and thank you once more, just like Yosimar said, for joining us today and for supporting and for promoting this and just, for participating in the conversation.
Gracias.
Yeah, so we'll see you all at 6. If y'all need me, you know how to get a hold of me. Okay.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Have a gorgeous day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.